Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on Cafe New Canadians. This session is brought to you by New Canadians in collaboration with Wood Green Community Connections. New Canadians is a TV and web-based series for newcomers to Canada. Through its nationally aired TV show and multiple digital platforms, New Canadians informs and educates newcomers and immigrants about settlement, education, employment resources, and services, other services that help them with their journey here, as well as immigration news and success stories. You can watch New Canadians every week on Omni Television across Canada. You can also visit their website at newcanadians.tv or their YouTube channel where this session is currently being live streamed. I mentioned that this session is co-hosted by Wood Green Community Connections, and I'd like to have Teresa Tao introduce Wood Green and the programming there. Over to you, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa from Wood Green, and I'm happy to meet you here virtually for tonight's event. This meaningful, wonderful panel event is actually a collaboration between our Community Connections program and Cafe New Canadian. So it's such a great honor for me to be here. And I'd like to briefly share with you a little bit about what our program is about and the kind of services that we do offer. So the Community Connections program has been operating for more than 10 years now. And our programming services are specifically designed to help newcomer job seekers for their career success and for their full integration into the Canadian society. And how do we do that? We do it by connecting newcomers with local Canadian volunteers through very meaningful group events and mentorship. So in terms of mentorship, we offer one-on-one career mentorship and group mentorship. And in terms of group activities, we have English conversation circles, French conversation circles, a whole bunch of professional networking events, panel events, job search training seminars and webinars, and also Canadian workplace culture related career coaching events. And we have a lot of other innovative programming, such as newcomer well-being live coaching seminars. And we also have ESL social club for newcomers and more, much more. If you're interested in joining us, you're more than welcome to contact either my colleague, Katerina Soto, for mentorship programming, or with myself for virtual events and activities and seminars. Thank you, and enjoy tonight's event. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Teresa. So my name's Daryl Pinto, and I'm going to be the moderator for tonight's session. I'm also an active volunteer with Wood Green. We have 4 amazing panelists to share their experiences and insights with you tonight, starting with Tatiana Astray, who is a lecturer at the Schulich Executive Education Center, Ino Ika, who is with My BA Career, Marion Olivier from Augeoni HR Consulting, and Laura Soria from CIBC. Before I get the panelists to introduce themselves, I do want to remind our viewers that this is live and interactive. So if you would like to submit any questions or comments to the panelists, you're welcome to do so through either the Zoom, if you're watching on Zoom, through the Q&A tab on Zoom, or via the live chat option on YouTube. All right, so I'm going to get started with introductions. And Iko, I'm going to start with you. If you can tell us which country you trace your roots from before moving to Canada, and then share what you do in about 3 minutes or less.
So my name is Eno Eka. I'm an immigrant from Nigeria. I moved to Canada in 2018. I'm a business analysis consultant and also a career coach. I also teach business analysis at the University of Manitoba. I moved to Canada in April 2018. My journey so far has been an amazing journey. But I'd like to say that what attracted me to Canada is the diversity and how inclusive the country is. And this topic of discussion today is it's a topic that I'm excited about because it's something that I had to learn as a newcomer to Canada, because I had to learn how to excel at interviews as a newcomer and a new immigrant. So I'm happy to share, share what I've learned, any tips or strategies that I've learned over, the past 2.5 years with everyone that's joining us today. I live in Calgary, in Alberta, and I now own my own company, as well as doing consulting. And it's been an amazing experience here, and I'm happy to be on this panel today. Thank you, Daryl.
That's amazing. Thank you, Eno. Marion, how about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marion Olivier. Thank you for inviting me to exchange with you today. So I was born and raised in France. I studied in UK, and I spent 4 years in China before moving to Canada 3 years ago. So I own a bachelor in psychology in trainings and a master's degree in international HR management. I am a certified human resources leader here in Canada. I've been working in several HR positions across the globe, and I spent 2 years helping newcomers in a non-for-profit by developing programs for mentoring, diversity, and inclusion. So earlier this year, I launched my own business called Augeoni, and I provide special HR consulting to companies and individuals. Among those, the policy writing, trainings, conflict management, and coaching. So my goal is to help people to make work better and to improve their lives. And I am a positive person, and my heart sings when I empower people to find their own solutions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marion. Tatiana?
Hi, so my name is Tatiana Astray. I'm currently completing my PhD at Schulich. I'm actually 1 month away from being a doctor officially, so I'm very excited. I came to Canada, my background's Ukrainian, Cuban, and my family actually came here as political refugees, but I came here when I was little, so I got a chance to see, to grow up in Canada, but see the perspectives of my parents, like going through the system. Right now, I'm a researcher and an educator. I research on trust, emotional expressions, and I educate mainly in the context of negotiations. Right now, I'm training at the Schulich Executive Training Center, and I also teach at the Conrad School of Business. So I'm really excited to be speaking here today because one of the trainings that I provide is specifically on job offers. So I'm very excited to share that knowledge with all of you here today. Thank you.
Great. And how about you, Laura?
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Soria. I am currently Director of Talent Acquisition at CIBC. So when it came to this topic, I was really excited to be able to share some information. My background is I'm actually from Guatemala, and similar to Tatiana, I came here as refugees with my family many, many years ago. But I watched how my parents struggled to adjust and find employment, and I just really that made such an impact on me. And I'm just really grateful to be able to clear pathways for others so they can be connected to meaningful employment.
Wonderful. So you all have either coaching or an HR background. So you've probably conducted lots of interviews yourselves, or maybe you've been on the other side interviewing for jobs. And Laura, I'm going to maybe get you to start because preparation is so much a part of the process of any interview. Do you have any pre-interview routines or rituals that you would recommend, either use yourself or you would recommend to the audience?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you asked that question because when I was thinking about this, preparation is so important. And I've sat in many, many interviews, and I've been in many interviews, but really it comes down to do your research, make sure that, so number one, do your research, know what you're getting into, know about the company, know about the people, use the resources like LinkedIn, use your network. But when it comes to rituals, I think it's really about making sure that you are well rested. And even if you're not, because life can happen, is just make sure that you've got time before and time after that interview so that you can have a mindfulness moment, have a tea, breathe, take away all the distractions, and just really get grounded and remember that you have a lot to offer, and this is no matter what the outcome is, it's going to be a good experience to build your skill.
What I'm hearing, Laura, is find ways to really relax before and after that interview to get into that ideal mindset. Do you have anything to add to what Laura shared with us?
Absolutely, I do. And Laura shared really, good points. Preparing for your interview, I would say, like she said, first of all, is research, right? Know what the company does, what products or services they offer, what kind of industry they play in, and then also research about the role. Why do they need me if you're applying for an accountant role or a project manager role? It doesn't really matter, but you need to understand, why do they need me right now? And then try to tie back what you're offering based on the value you're going to offer to the company to the need right now. Maybe the company is launching a new product. Maybe they're trying to roll out a new service offering. Maybe they're just been acquired. Maybe they're trying to partner with a new company. There's a reason why they want you for that role. So you have to understand, why do they want me for this role? So doing your research is so key. And then preparing ahead. So looking at the job description, and then that gives you a clue as to what sort of skills are they looking for, right? What kind of competencies are they looking for based on the job description? Because a job description is like a wish list of what they're looking for in that person. So, looking at the job description and trying to tie all the skills that you have already and those that are transferable skills to that role, and then preparing ahead, because a lot of the questions you're going to be asked are based on that job description. So also prepare yourself with questions and mock prep so that you're confident and you're answering the questions from a place of confidence and value, and you're not stuttering during the interview.
Great. Marion, what's your pre-interview ritual, if you have any?
I have a ritual of preparing as well. I have different steps. I start with self-reflect. I think it's important to know your worth, to list what you've done and what you enjoy doing. Have a handy list of all your achievements in your different positions. It's so easy to forget when you start to have a longer career. So know your unique selling points. So once you self-reflected, I also go through the job description as well. Analyze. I actually print it out, and I take different colors for different pens, and I just try to group by ideas. What are the kind of what are the skills that are needed exactly, and I try to analyze the language as well to know how to speak with this company. Research, of course, company, industry, as Laura and Eno said, but also just a quick glance as interviewers' LinkedIn to see if there are any common grounds. I list questions for the interviews. I avoid yes and no questions. So questions. I also avoid why questions. So questions that make people speak, like why, how, and try to get them to show your wit and get a conversation going. So then I take everything back, and I try to assess the match. I try to pull myself in the employer's shoes and try, as it's been said, that to identify the employer's growing pains. What are they looking for exactly? How do I answer those needs? I like to go through a model that is called Padman model, where you look at the different dimensions and check yourself in front of this job description and this company. So presentation, ability, dependability, motivation, attitude, and network are all reasons that employers look at that are usually not on the job description. So I craft a few good answers. I practice in front of your mirror, in front of your mother, hire an English teacher, but as much as you can get comfortable enough so that it feels natural to you.
So a lot of emphasis so far on research pre-interview. Tatiana, I've listened to you speak a lot about body language and getting into that frame of mind that Laura brought up, you know, that relaxed state of mind where you're not too stressed out during that interview. I watched a fascinating TED Talk about trying to fake yourself into confidence. You know, you do the Wonder Woman pose for 2 minutes prior to any stressful event. And I do that today. But is there any advice from a preparation standpoint in terms of rituals that you would advise the audience on?
So I think when it comes to body language, we all kind of want to fake confidence, but the reality is there is no substitute for good preparation. And what does that mean? In the context of negotiations, it's knowing how to set goals and how to increase your source of power. So in the interview context, it's knowing that when you start negotiating on a job offer, you're actually doing that before you even walk in. So knowing that when you set a goal, it should always be a little bit more aspirational so you can come down in price and that you feel good about it. In regards to sources of power, it's making sure that before you even walk into the job interview, it's making sure that you're looking for other jobs and having different options available to you so that you're not walking into the job with only one job interview. Will make a huge difference to the psychology of your ability to negotiate for yourself. It's also knowing that it's within your power to ask for what you are worth and that people want to hire people who can speak about money, because that means that if you can speak and advocate for yourself, it means you can advocate for the company. That becomes a source of comfort. And all those things add up to, in that moment, then knowing that you can ask for what you're worth. In regards to preparation, I loved all the tools that Laura, Marion, and Ina were saying. I would say making sure you write down beforehand every single argument so you can articulate specifically what you are worth and tying it to some sort of source of finance or some sort of sales and company growth. That's one of the best ways in North America to prove your worth, to say that you are contributing to the bottom line of the company. And all of that, when you walk in, will give you a comfortable sense of power so that you're not faking a source of confidence, but you're actually confident walking in and saying, you know what, I have different options on the table. I'm here because I want to be here. And here's why I am specifically worth something to you. That's a really beautiful way to negotiate. And that's what you're always trying to work towards.
Wonderful. Tatiana, I'm going to stay with you on this first audience question. And many newcomers go through this experience, right? They're not familiar with the job market and the postings that they see online, and sometimes are the target of scams. So the question from the audience member is, what kinds of red flags should newcomers watch out for where it's not a real job posting, it's really an opening to a scam, that they are going to be sharing some pretty sensitive information about themselves in order to get?
So one of the things I would say is do your research about what's legal in Canada so that you know when you walk in what you can and cannot talk about. If someone is asking you to say, let's say, do free work to prove yourself for a company, that is a huge red flag. You should be compensated for being trained on the job. It's fine to do a test and a job interview. It is not fine to do work for free. Research the company online and see if there's a reputation online. Sometimes people will talk about things on Reddit or Glass Ceiling, and that will be a bit of a red flag. If you research the industry and these people don't seem to have a presence online, I would say potentially a red flag. And one thing I do want to say, like I know the immigrant and refugee community, and there's a little bit of taking advantage of actually within that community. So do not necessarily partner with people from your community just because you think you're safe. It might actually be in your benefit to make sure you're trying out reputable companies because there's a better chance you're going to be compensated accordingly. I just want to say that because I understand that sometimes there's this desire to think that you're going to be taken care of by people from your community, but there's actually a lot of taking advantage of within that community. So be careful and make sure that if you do anything, you're always being compensated for your time. That is so important.
Great. You know, I see you nodding. So you share the same opinion as Tatiana?
I do, and much more, because I have been, when I moved to Canada newly, I had my resume on Indeed and Monster and all those job boards, and I did get some scam companies reach out to me. So some red flags would be: one, never give your SIN, which is your social insurance number. Never give out your SIN to any employer when they're asking, when they're trying to interview. Secondly, if you don't remember applying for a job, or they can't exactly tell you why they want you, then that's a red flag. Also, you don't need to give them your full date of birth, like the day, the month, the year. That's personal information. They don't need that at that point in time. And then, like Tatiana said, do your research. Search for the company. They have a good website. Who are their partners? Who are the suppliers? All this information is there. Go on LinkedIn. Do they have employees on LinkedIn? Look out for who the people are. Do their profiles look very sketchy? And then also just follow your gut. A lot of times your gut feeling would tell you, that something feels sketchy about this, and just follow your gut. And lastly is the one that's the most common, are the ones that ask for your bank account details and say they're going to pay some money to your account, and then you're going to send them some Bitcoin or anything like that. If you never apply for any kind of job like that, don't be desperate to take on those opportunities because there's a promise of payment. A lot of times they're scammers.
Marion or Laura, anything to add to that? Red flags.
Yes, there are some pyramidal schemes that you need to be aware of. So check also how people plan to, if they ask you for money for your trainings, for example, that's a big no. And regarding what we spoke about just before about free work, I agree that free work is not a good thing, but volunteering is a big thing in Canada. So there's a difference. There's a line here, but if you meet people and that ask you if you should be happy to volunteer for something, very often this leads to maybe an entry-level position and then something better and better. So just don't always say no without first looking at it. If you feel safe, if you think it's something you can learn from and it's volunteering, then you can do it.
Awesome.
I guess the last thing I'll add, it's a saying here in Canada: if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Mm-hmm. So you can look for the cues that all the information everyone has shared is very valid, but just, listen to your gut, do your research. And when you do your research, I think you'll find some good information. And to Marion's point, there are many reputable organizations that partner with charities to do volunteer work, and you'd be able to identify that it's reputable.
Great. I just want to remind the audience again, if you want to type in your questions to the QA box, and if there's a question that's been submitted already and you really want that question asked, like it. The more likes the question receives, the higher it moves to the top of the list, and more likely I'm going to ask the question to the panelists. Laura, I'm going to stay with you on this one. So our audience comes from all over the world. Either they're here in Canada already or they are yet to arrive in Canada. And they come to Canada with different cultural norms around interviews. So what advice would you give a newcomer that's not too familiar with Canadian norms around interviewing? What are the things that are normal here or seen to be normal here for corporations in Canada?
Thank you, Daryl, for the question. One thing I would say is punctuality. I think an understanding that we like to be on time, and many interviews are now virtual. So being prepared ahead of time to make sure that your internet, that your connections are working, is important. The other thing I would say, and even myself, because I was preparing for this presentation, I dressed up a little bit. I put a little jacket on. I put a little bit of lipstick, as my mom would tell me. Put a little lipstick on. For me, that's something she would say. But it is norms like dress. Make sure that you're presentable, that you're on time, that you come prepared with some questions, that you've done some research, that again, I'm going to go back to the research. It's so important, and we can, if anybody has questions about how much to do, I think those are some important norms to think about.
Thank you, Laura. Marion, anything to add to that?
I think that it's important to be in line with the culture of the company. Dress one level up what they usually do, but if it's a very casual company, you shouldn't be too much. So just adapt. Do your research. It's the best advice. That's right.
Okay. I don't want to belabor the question, but Eno or Tatiana, if you have anything additional to add, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So, moving to Canada as a new immigrant, you come from a different culture. The norms are different. I find every company is also different. Just like Marion said, some companies are very casual, some are very corporate. You don't want to be all dressed up in a suit and a tie, and and maybe a shirt and pants would have been fine. But always look good. Be punctual. Be professional. Do your research and speak the language of the organization, because that's how you're going to be seen as a cultural fit. So a lot of organizations are looking for cultural fits. So a lot of times it's less about the technical skills and all that back home in my home country, you want to get into a job, you're given a test, you're going to do math and English, and you're doing like, maybe they give you 30 minutes to finish like 100 questions. It's very technical, but here it's so different. It's more about behavioral questions and cultural fit. And they just want to see that you're adaptable, you're proactive, and that you're going to blend in with the organization. So be your true self, like be real, right? You don't need to be something you're not. Be honest, be vulnerable. Something that I always shared and I would still share is I always say I'm a new immigrant to the country. And I tell them where I came from and why I'm here, and also what I'm bringing to the table, because I'm bringing a different perspective. I'm bringing fresh ideas, right? So you want to make sure that you're vulnerable and you're honest. I've seen immigrants who want to lie about their status and say, "Oh, I've been in Canada for 2 years," and you don't need to do that. Be honest. Companies here want to just see that you're going to be a good fit for the organization, and you're going to blend in with their culture. That's what I'd like to add.
I'd also like to add a little bit about how culture impacts negotiation norms. So different cultures have assumptions about whether or not you can negotiate a job offer. And in Canada, the default is you can. So if you come from a culture where you can't, it's important to know that in Canada, there's usually a base salary, there's usually a salary range, and the HR cannot give you that salary increase if you do not ask for it. So as a starting assumption, always assume that there's a bucket of money that they're willing to give you if you ask for it. Another just kind of tip I want to leave you guys with is the fact that when it comes to negotiating in Canada, you can substitute economic for non-economic exchanges. So for example, if a company can't give you that extra jump in salary, maybe they might be able to give you a few days off. So doing your work beforehand and preparing to negotiate and make those trade-offs is going to make a huge difference in the interview itself.
Great. So Tatiana, that's a really important point. And I think many newcomers lack the confidence or maybe the knowledge, I think more than the confidence to ask that for that extra amount in terms of that negotiation around salary or any of the non-financial benefits. Is there any rules of thumb that you would provide as guidance to someone that just arrived in Canada within a year and they're in the job market, and maybe they're at the interview stage and now they're closing out that negotiation?
I would say that usually immigrants undersell themselves, and because they're starting from a position where there's less money, for them a few $1,000s might seem like a lot of money. But from a company perspective, a few $1,000s is nothing. And sometimes you have to understand how job packages work, and therefore research is really important. For example, when you start a job, sometimes there's a signing bonus, sometimes there's a year-end bonus, sometimes there's covering of training, sometimes there's days off, sometimes there's family time leave. And these are all different components that you can negotiate for yourself. So understanding these different components of the job offer is very important, and coming in understanding that it is actually the expectation for you to negotiate is very, very important. So you don't need to feel embarrassed, because that's actually the norm in Canada. If you don't negotiate, I've spoken to lots of people in HR, and they say things like, I really like the person, I wish them I could give them more money, but they didn't ask, and so I can't, right? All you have to do is ask. The worst thing that's going to happen is the person's going to say, I can't give you that. And then your job is to say, if you can't give me that, could you give me this? And just keep asking. If you can't give me that, could you give me this? And see what happens. Even if you get a few days extra for vacation, that's going to mean a lot to you in the long run. So I just want you to know that it is the norm. And so be open-minded, and it's actually not a big ask. Whatever you think your ask is, bump it up and ask that and see what happens, and just see what happens. That's my general advice.
Great. Marion, I'm going to direct the next audience question to you. This has got several likes on it, so it's top of mind for most of our audience members. Talking about mistakes that you've encountered very often with people you've interviewed, what are the most common mistakes that you've come across? The frame of the question to ask, a mistake that will destroy your chances of getting the job. So on the extreme end, but even not even the extreme end, just the sort of the more common things that are things you've experienced or seen.
So I'd say one of the most common mistake or harder thing to balance might be to get the right amount of telling about your skills without overdoing and without underselling either. So get this right balance is something that is hard to get, and some people might come across as too much, and this is a big no for a lot of companies. So as other mistakes, of course, being late, so being like inappropriately dressed, or another one that just came to my mind and that is actually quite important is if the answers are too negative, it won't look like Canadian norms either. You need to have a can-do attitude here.
Okay, so I'm going to be very specific with that last point you made, Marion, and pass it over to Laura. That sort of don't be negative at an interview. So let's say that my last job wasn't the happiest experience for me, and I get asked at the interview this question, which is, tell me about your last job. What might be a way you might frame the answer to that question?
Thank you, Daryl. I knew that question was coming my way. So it really, to Marion's point, the can-do attitude is also about being able to frame. So when you're explaining, being able to talk about what experiences and skills you gain from that last experience. Everyone goes through negative experiences, but what was the positive of it? And it's not that we always have to be so positive about everything, but what did you learn? What was the growth opportunity is the area that I would focus on. One other thing I did want to add around that is to everybody, Eno and Tatiana and Marion have covered, is it's your attributes that need to shine through. So even though it wasn't a great experience, how did you rise above? What was challenging? And you may find that employers interviewing you are going to ask you about, tell me about a time that you failed. Tell me about a time that you had a difficult experience and how did you do? They're looking for that strong attribute of you as a person. How did you rise above the situation?
Excellent. Anything else to add in terms of common mistakes you've encountered?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would like to add this, that for new immigrants, we tend to disqualify ourselves even before we even apply. So when we take a chance and apply for that role, and then we get that interview, we already feel like we're not qualified. We don't know what we're doing there. And because of that, we answer questions from a place of, I don't have Canadian experience, so I'm not even sure they're going to accept me. So the mindset is so key. Now, you need to understand that the fact that you're sitting right there speaking to that hiring manager, there's something about you, that attracted them to you. So you need to communicate from a place of value, right? So when you're talking about your past experience, even though it's different from North American experience, be able to translate it to North American experience. So that's why doing your research is so key. A typical example that a mistake that a lot of new immigrants make is maybe a reference to maybe using a particular tool or software, right? So you're asked, do you tell me about your experience using this tool or this software or this skill? Maybe you haven't used it before, but if you've done your research on it and you probably used something that's similar to it, you can say, well, I don't have experience using XYZ tool. However, I have used ABC tool and I found that they're actually very similar because they actually do the same thing. Now, during my time at ABC company, when I was working on XYZ project, I used this tool, and then you talk about the value. So you've quickly switched the fact that you don't know how to use it, but you've talked about using something similar, and you've talked about the value you were able to bring to the table at your former company. So don't ever feel like, oh, I don't know how to use this tool. Like, research it, look at what you've done, and if you've used anything that's similar to it, make sure that you're narrating that instead of telling them, oh no, I don't know how to use it, but I can learn. How about you say, I've used something similar to this, and this is what the value that I was able to offer with the similar tool.
That's great bridging advice,
Thanks.
Tatiana, I'm going to put the next audience question to you. So this audience member wants to know if the person's been declined after several interviews, but after real-time interviews, no one really gives you feedback, like honest feedback to say, here are areas that you really need to work on. So in the absence of that feedback and after several declines, what advice would you give someone in terms of how do they recalibrate? How do they figure out what's going wrong with the way they are interviewing?
So there's kind of two avenues that I would suggest. The first is, if you didn't get the job interview, but there was someone in HR that you thought was kind of nice, or a manager that interviewed you, go back and email the person and ask them. Just say, look, I would genuinely appreciate if you could give me 5-10 minutes to just tell me what I did wrong, just so I could understand. Most people will want to help you out, I promise. Because if you got to that point, they saw something special. And honestly, you might think that you didn't get it because you weren't qualified enough, but you don't know what's happening in the background. And one thing I found in my career, I have asked people why I haven't gotten the job interview. And for example, in one case, it was because someone with more experience than me, that should have been multiple layers above me, was willing to take a job way below at half the price. So the company said, you know what, we got to take this person. So just ask the company. You never know, you could get an honest answer. And the other thing is, find someone who you think represents like an HR, the Canadian perspective, and ask them to give you a mock interview and see what they say. Sometimes getting someone you trust, it's easier to take their feedback if it might be hard to hear, especially if they're doing it in the spirit of helping you grow. So those are the two specific things that I would ask. Never assume that you can't get better and that you aren't worth it. Always assume you are worth it. You just need to communicate a little bit better. So what are the skills you can do to just improve that? You will get it. It's just a matter of time and picking up the skill sets.
Great. Marion, I'm going to come to you because I know you've done a lot of volunteering with newcomers. If you don't have a network here, you come to Canada and you're starting from scratch, it's really difficult to have that ask to someone, as Tatiana said, right? Have someone do mock interviews with you, what kind of advice would you give to a newcomer that's trying to find someone to help them with this practice interviewing skill?
So there are actually a lot of organizations like Wood Green, for example. I guess they provide this kind of services where you can meet people. There are a lot of online events. And even if you don't know anybody there yet, you're able to reach out from anywhere you are right now. There are virtual dinners. There are events about many different things. Just get to know people and ask them. You can reach out to some people on LinkedIn as well. Sometimes if you don't have like access to the right person exactly right now, you can still try with anybody else in your network. There are also apps for networking that you can use where you just present yourself and then you can get matched with people where that can help you. So I think there are resources. Just try everything you can. You will get to it.
Great. Now, my experience with newcomers is there's two components to getting any successful job. And one is technical skills and your sort of background around the skill set that's required. And second, there's the soft skills that are really culturally unique to Canada in many cases. Many newcomers have a bias towards the technical aspect, right? They focus on the degrees and their certificates, and they figure, I'm just going to have to get a few more certificates and I'll be able to get this Canadian job. And they don't pay as much attention to the soft skills. Laura, I'm going to punt this to you. So from your vantage point, sitting on the interviewing side of the table, do soft skills matter, first of all, to you? And what advice would you give a newcomer in that regard?
Absolutely. Thank you. When you think about soft skills, and I know you pointed out about the values and bring your true self, your authentic self, the soft skills are really where the world of employment in Canada is going. Technology is going to solve many of the technical pieces. Eventually, technology will be so advanced that we will have all the answers that we need. So it's going to be your relationship building skills, your ability to negotiate situations, contracts, your ability to communicate with people, and your ability to help people. So when you think about the soft skills, they are important. If you're a very technical person, that's still great, but you have to remember, how are you going to transfer that technical ability? And that you do that through the soft skills. And I do want to add one thing to that. And Tatiana, you touched on it. I think it's important to remember that how you're feeling about you matters. So remember that you are worth it, that you have a lot to offer, and it's just a matter of time that with practice and networking, like, you will land a role, and then the next one and the next one. So it's really about almost negotiating with yourself to be okay with how you're showing up and be confident that you have what it takes, and develop those skills where you might find some gaps, collect feedback, and don't give up.
Remind me again, how long you've been in Canada?
2 years and 7 months.
2 years. So take me to your personal journey. When it comes to soft skills, the emphasis you placed on it when you first arrived and the emphasis you place on it now, what have you learned in that journey?
Oh, wow. It's a huge gap, a huge gap. I remember my first interview. I messed it up, and that's because I wasn't prepared for how the interviews were. I was prepared for something very technical, that I had to show how good I was at math and all that. But the questions I was asked were very behavioral questions, like if I had an argument with my boss, we had conflicting opinions, how was I going to speak to my boss, questions about how I was going to speak to an angry customer and all that. And it kind of threw me off balance because I wasn't expecting that. And I think I was just 2 or 3 days in Canada, and I hadn't prepared. I just felt it was the typical kind of interview styles in my country. So huge gap. I went back to learn about interviews and understand that what employers were looking for were not, the fact that, I graduated with distinctions, or I have, like he said, degrees or certifications. Those are great to get your foot in the door, like to get the opportunity to interview. However, at that point in time, they want to know you beyond your resume. They want to know about your leadership skills. They want to know about your conflict resolution skills, your communication skills, your interpersonal skills, negotiation, influencing skills, your emotional intelligence. So you're going to be asked a lot of scenario-based questions. And now it's become so natural to me that I don't feel like I need to prepare so hard to answer questions about my soft skills. Now I even want to know more about my interviewer and the company, because now I know that I have the soft skills that are required. And I know that when I'm asked a scenario-based question, I'm going to answer those questions from my own experience and sharing my authentic story and being able to relate that to the role that I'm applying for. So in the past 2.5 years, I have totally understood why soft skills are more important than the hard skills. And whenever I meet a new immigrant, I'm always trying to let them know that that's what's more important. Practice that and, learn more about why an organization needs you, and then learn how you can incorporate those soft skills. Because the truth is, we want people who are going to work in our company that are going to respect our customers, going to respect their own colleagues as well.
So we know you brought up one question, a behavioral question that I love, and I'm gonna punt the same thing to you now to ask to answer on behalf of the audience, and that is, if you were to have an argument or a disagreement with your superior or your boss, how would you handle that?
Okay, so definitely answering that differently, because the first time I was asked that kind of question, I was thrown off balance because I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that was the kind of questions that were going to be asked. But right now, if I was asked that question, I'll definitely want to make sure that I'm answering that question using the STAR methodology. So which is STAR, which is the situation, the task I was supposed to carry out, the action that I did carry out, and then the result, and maybe even any lessons that I learned from that situation. So always make sure that you're also telling a story. So storytelling is an important part of interviewing that you should incorporate into your interview answers. So for me, I would talk about the fact that I was working on a project. So during my time at ABC Bank, I was working on a project, and we were going to implement this new technology using a new methodology called Agile. So we're using the old way, which is called the waterfall. And then I happened to have a new boss midway, through the project. And it was my first time leading my team as a new business analyst. And I had a new boss. Now, this boss came from another organization who, where they haven't started using this new methodology we were about to use. And halfway through our project, which was 6 months into our project, my new boss, said that we're going to start from the beginning and actually start using the old methodology, which we had gone past. And, being a new team lead, I knew that was going to be a challenge to the implementation of our new technology. And we needed to make sure we get to market fast because we had made a promise to our customers. So what I did was, schedule a meeting with my new boss, and then of course, prepare a business case to make him understand that this is where we are right now. However, these are the things we've achieved. So I came to him with the facts and the figures. This is what we've been able to achieve using this new methodology, and explaining to him that this is now what is being used globally to implement new technologies. And the fact that we have, we have a goal because we have kept our word, made a promise to our customers and want to keep our word. And the fact that we have a projection that if we're able to launch at our desired date, which is the date we've given our customers, maybe the 1st of December, our projections is that sales are going to spike that day because we built the momentum for that. And therefore, that's going to increase revenue for the organization before the year end by X amount of dollars, right? So I'm able to also drive the value and get my new boss's buy-in and get him to see that what we're doing is in line with the organization's goals, and help him understand that we've also done some training, and that we can invite him to our meetings to get to understand more about what we're using right now. So what I've shown in that example is that I've shown that I use my communication skills. I was able to influence and negotiate on behalf of my team, and use my influencing skills to get the buy-in of my boss. I also showing that I have good interpersonal skills because I'm also relating my customers, and I'm also emotionally intelligent, and I keep my word with my customers. I want to make sure that I'm delivering this technology to my customers as at when due. But I also have great business acumen, because what I'm doing doesn't just impact us as an organization. It doesn't just impact the customers, the word, keeping my word with my customers, but also impacting the bottom line of the organization. So right now, I definitely would answer that question very differently using the style I use right now compared to 2 years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Tatiana, said something I want to pick up on, and it's about telling personal stories. And we have another audience member with the question, is it okay to tell personal stories in an interview, especially when it comes to gaps? Someone's taken some time off to look after their children, for example, or there's a gap in the resume. So is telling personal stories okay in an interview?
I think you really have to think about what is the goal of your personal story. So one really great book I remember reading is Arlene Dickinson, and there was a period where she wasn't working because she was taking care of her family. And one of the first times she had a job interview, someone said, well, you don't have any work experience, so why do you think you're a great fit in our company? And in this context, it was a selling role where there was a budget and she had to be very specific. And she said, you know what? I may not have been working in a formal role, but I've been taking care of my children, and I'll let you know what, like I've been budgeting, I've been teaching how to, make sure my kids do this. I've been trying to be innovative. And if you guys search online, I'm sure also she talks about this. The main point being, it's fine to talk about specifics insofar as it shows you and it highlights an attribute that the company would care about. Unfortunately, when they ask you about these things, they always want to know, well, what happened in did you learn something in that process that might be beneficial to us? So talking about anything personal is fine insofar as you just relate it back to your company. And I do want to just mention one really quick thing about soft skills, because it ties into this question. People hire people who they want to work with, and hard skills are learnable. So even if you don't have the hard skills, you can use your soft skills and storytelling to basically position yourself as a person who is willing to learn, who can get the job done, who is eager and wants to prove themselves. And in that capacity, it's, personable stories are great, because even at the end of the story, maybe you don't have all the skill sets, but maybe someone's gonna, see themselves a little bit in you. Maybe they're gonna want to take you on. Maybe they want to mentor, but never from a place of weakness, never from a place because you can't do it. Always from a place of like, you have the core skills and you will be a benefit of to the company, but like the kernels are there in your story. So all of that, I think, has to be really rehearsed beforehand, just to make sure that like you're never saying it for the first time in the interview or to someone else that matters. Always rehearse it beforehand.
Great. And, I love the point you made about storytelling. It has to be specific, has to be relevant to the question being asked. I'm going to get each one of you to share a story from your own experience about an interview, either one that you were interviewing for or one that you were interviewing a candidate. Something that you think would be instructive and insightful to the audience. So Marion, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So for me, shortly after arriving to Canada, I had an experience kind of similar maybe to Ino's experience. I had an interview for a company. I had a great talk on the phone with the recruiter, and I got to meet the CEO shortly after. So he was an English-speaking Canadian, close to retirement, and I felt very intimidated. So I was unprepared, I was stressed, I was afraid. I completely failed showing what I knew. So I answered in a way that I found myself quite stupid, to tell you the truth. And I ended up getting a very quick no-fit answer that was saying, I am looking for a facilitator. For no, you're not a facilitator. So I couldn't help to feel ashamed for a while, but I learned 3 things from this. first, de-dramatize. Like the word stays the same if you fail an interview. I mean, that's okay. It happens. Second, listen, because in this example, I failed to hear the precise needs of this company and to address them through our conversation. And the third one is growth. You will meet people around you that have insights to share. So you can get mentors, you can read, you can self-develop in many different ways. I ended up learning from this experience that it was important to be able to facilitate a conversation, and I did it afterwards. And this happens to be tremendously useful in my career.
Wonderful. I love that mindset that you brought up, Marion, and that is it's never a failure, it's a learning opportunity, right? And you only get better at any skill, including interviews, through practice. Laura, how about you? What would you like to share from your experience?
Oh my goodness. I was thinking of so many. I remember one in particular that was, I had prepared, I had practiced, I'd done everything. And when I went, it was a panel interview. So there was 3 interviewers and me. And it was very intimidating and I wasn't 100% sure. And it was a bit of a stretch for me. And I had done all the work, but when I was in the interview, I could just feel like I wasn't landing the points and I wasn't communicating as clearly. And I walked away from that experience. I was like, I don't think I got that one. And I'm actually happy. Obviously I was not successful because I just wasn't crisp. I wasn't clear as I wanted to be. We weren't connecting. The hiring managers and I were not connecting, and I did not get that job. But the person that got the job, they were great. And the more I learned about that job after, I was actually really grateful that I didn't get that job, because I was like, oh, I'm glad I didn't really ultimately that wasn't the right job for me. My life went in a different direction, but I did learn. Although I was prepared, although I was really prepared, it was those soft skills, that connection point that was missing. So I learned from it.
And on that point, Laura, about connection skills, what's your sort of number one thing that you watch out for now that you're more experienced and you've gone through that learning journey?
Thank you. So the next point, so I had one where I was prepared, but I didn't feel like I was landing as well, but the connection that I had and what I used was storytelling. Mm-hmm. So what created success for me in the last interview that I had was I was able to tell a story that related to the values of that business unit. And I was able to connect with the person because they were able to see who I was by the story that I told that mattered to them and the values and the goals that they were aspiring to. So even though I wasn't as crisp and as prepared, it was my storytelling and my authenticity that came through.
Wonderful. Eno, what can you share?
Oh, I have a couple of experiences, but I'll just pick this one. And this one I find will be very helpful for new immigrants, the people that joined us today or that will watch this after today, is that it's your job, it's your duty to give as much information with regards to your experience as possible. So I'll explain. So back home, I had a couple of years of experience in financial services. So I had a lot of interviews from a lot of financial services companies, so like banks and credit unions. And it was great. There were some that I got, some that I didn't. However, what I found was the ones that I got and was even able to negotiate higher offers was because I took it upon myself to let them understand, what I'm bringing to the table. So an example is during one of my interviews, I did my research and I understood that they were trying to implement a new banking system, and I'd worked in the bank, and the banking system is really the same, right? The front end and the back end, what the tellers use in the front end and then what's used in the back end as well. So understanding that I had that same experience, what I had to do was every time that I was speaking about my experience, I would relate it to their own banking system. And I would say, just like your banking system called this, I also worked on this. So I was always able to relate what I'd done to that. Also, I use storytelling to actually give them a breakdown of the kind of organization I worked at. So I made sure they understood that I was coming from financial services background and understand that I worked on large projects. And because I was able to give good detail regards to the size of the bank, the branches, a lot of times they would say, wow, that was a very big bank. We just have like 5 or 6 branches. You've worked with a bank that has 30 branches. That means you're even more experienced, right? You've been able to work with multiple stakeholders on larger projects. They definitely will now see the value you bring to the table. A lot of new immigrants try to play small when they're in interviews because they feel like, oh, I just want to get this job and I don't want to sound like, I know so much or I've done so much. It's okay to speak about your achievements in a way that it shows value, not in a way that you're trying to be braggadocious, but in a way that shows value. So something that I implemented, in my interview, and especially that interview, the director, from that point, all she asked about was that project. She was so interested in that project. Now, if I didn't share and tell her about the project and the size and what I did, if I was trying to play small and say, well, I just worked in the bank and not giving as much detail as was needed for that role, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that role. So please do not play small. Talk about what you've done, share as much as is relevant to the role, but also communicate it from a place of value so that the hiring manager can see what you're bringing to the table.
Thank you, Eno. And last word to you, Tatiana.
So I want to share an experience of what it was like for me to interview for position before and after the negotiation training that I have, just because there's such a stark contrast. So before I did the negotiation training, I was always thinking about how I could jump through their hoop to get their job. I wasn't thinking at all about what I wanted from a position. And as I started taking my negotiation training and like reading more about how you properly negotiate, one of the things that started happening is I started thinking about what was important for me and what do I need to be happy in a job and how can I grow in a company and how can I make sure that I am compensated for what I'm worth? Because otherwise I'm not going to be happy in the job. And I have to say, like watching my parents go through job interviews growing up, they were more worried about getting a job than getting the right one for them. After all the negotiation training that I did, I remember sitting in a job interview actually that I had just about a year ago. And I wasn't scared to talk about where parts of my career had failed because for me, it was a redirection and I had learned a lot about myself. I wasn't scared to ask for things because I knew that I was worth it and I needed those things to become a better person. So I asked for, money related to training and research and I got it. And it was amazing because I think that confidence really translated to someone that wanted to work with me because they understood that I was coming in to give a certain level of quality. And in that job interview, which I really want to give you guys is you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. And so your job is to figure out, do I even want to work here? And what do I need to feel good about working here, right? And ask them. And you might not get everything you want, but if you ask, you're going to get a lot more than what you settle for by keeping quiet. So I just want you to be empowered to just ask and understand that you are worth what you're worth. And so you should get that.
That's amazing, Tatiana. And in fact, all the advice and insights shared by all the panelists today. Now, we have run out of time, unfortunately. I wish we could keep this going for another hour. I do want to make a few quick housekeeping announcements before coming back to the panelists. So first of all, everyone who has registered and is watching this on Zoom, some good news for you. That everyone attending a session in November with Cafe New Canadians is now eligible to win one of 3 $150 packages by clearlyspeaking.ca. So your name's automatically entered into the draw and New Canadians will reach out to you at the end of November if you're one of the lucky winners. So good luck on that. I talked about New Canadians at the start of the session. You can follow New Canadians on multiple social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Telegram. Also subscribe to their newsletter and keep up to date on all the sessions coming up. They have an amazing inventory of previous episodes on their YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. One small request for the audience members on Zoom. Following the end of this session, you're going to receive a request to fill out a very quick survey for New Canadians. So if you can provide feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. It helps towards triangulating and improving the content for newcomers on the channel. And last but not least, on behalf of Wood Green Community Connections and Cafe New Canadians and New Canadians, I want to thank Eno, Tatiana, Marion, and Laura for taking the time, sharing wonderful tips and advice. I'm so sorry we weren't able to get through all the audience questions. There were many I was not able to get to, but clearly your talk and your sharing resonated with the audience. So thank you so much. Have a good night and stay safe.